Hi, my name's Lily and welcome to Small Talk. Okay, stating the obvious, long time no see, but I've been spending time working on things that bring me money. As much as I would love to sit here and talk about politics more regularly, it has not been possible. But at the beginning of January, I have a little bit of time and I'm just in time for Garden Party Gate. I mean, there's a long line of gates with this Conservative government. But, I've just watched Prime Minister's questions. So I'm going to give my reaction, give my perspective, because I am a Brit based in Barcelona. So I've been experiencing the pandemic from Spain, which has been really interesting to see the contrast of messaging and, the way different countries handle these things. It's been interesting to have my family at home in the UK and myself here. So let's start with Prime Minister's questions. So I just watched it. I had to turn it off. I haven't even got to the end because it's just painful. We all know what's going on. He should resign. He should leave. He's not going to. It's in the Tories' hands now, but they probably will just let him limp on and spend all of his political capital because, that will happen. And then maybe push for a boost by beheading the Hydra and growing a new head in the form of Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss, maybe before the May elections, and just get that bounce back. The problem is that it is contaminating their government. They all sit in there. They're all in the cabinet. And also, it's just a tragedy for the country because we are still living through a pandemic, a global situation. And the UK, unfortunately, is paralysed by political infighting, which is really hampering its public health response. And I think is really muddling everything, which it has been almost from the beginning. Which is also why I came off talking about it on YouTube, because it's like same, not different. What else is there to talk about? So briefly touching on PMQs, he has started by giving a sincere apology to the nation. But actually that apology wasn't for what it should be for. That apology was for within the rules, garden event outside somebody's working home, really forgetting to mention that an email was sent to 100 staffers. So, when, you had to spend time in your garden, as I saw my family having to do, or on their own, having to spend time singly on their own just with a support group. And instead, you could have invited 100 people. Why didn't you? It was apparently within the guidelines, especially if you have a working office there, some people work from home. And then he goes on to say that the public, he's really sorry that those that have suffered in the public might not see it that way. So actually it's just your perspective which is wrong, Talk about gaslighting, talk about lying. Let's just say that, because it's lying first and then it's gaslighting you and a manipulation. So, that's that. And then he then points again to Sue Gray, who is running a independent government-appointed commission into the whole thing, investigating, cannot disrupt the investigation into himself, which he could actually just tell us or resign or, have some humility for once. Anyway, obviously it's gone down badly. I've had a little check of Twitter. Conservative commentators like Dan Hodges of the Daily Mail. This is actually embarrassing now, is his tweet. Keir Starmer's destroying him, I think is another one. Yep, absolutely destroying him. And it is just been embarrassing. It was really difficult to watch. My teeth were grating and, there's just not any point defending it. But, as I've said, I think that there has been a problem with the way that the UK is talking about COVID continuously and that this hasn't changed from the very beginning. And I almost... I can't believe that it's still going on. I like to talk about what I mean. So, UK and Europe are not having diametrically different experiences when it comes to COVID caseload, deaths by proportion of population, and, things like this. And also the size of us, etc. If we look at our peers, things are somewhat similar, but the UK is performing worst in all categories. And I think that that's indicative, okay? So instead of being like, oh my God, there's a wave coming across Europe, will it reach here? And putting, the two sides against each other, as has been very common in the last 5 to 6 years. Omicron waves would have got everywhere. Whether you get it first or you're the second one to get it, it doesn't matter. It's how you respond to it as a country. It's how you manage your population. It's how you deal with this public health response. And actually, I think that the UK across the board has done one of the worst, if we look, just to tell you about the figures so that we can see how similar they are. So total UK deaths are obviously the highest in Europe. We've surpassed 150,000 and it's still climbing. I had a look, the 7-day average is 238 deaths. Like a day is the 7-day average. That's terrible. The only place that is above that is Germany on 259, but they have more than a 10 million bigger population than us, if you know what I mean. They're on 88 million people or something, and the UK has 74, so that's about 14 million people. So if you start to use those proportionately, and their total death total is 115, so it's a lot less. How can this be explained by, why is the UK doesn't have the biggest population and it has the most deaths completely? Where I am in Spain is just on 99, and I think that just goes to show that, cases, we've all been seeing records of 100,000 a day, 80,000 a day, 200,000 a day. And cases are not the metric that you should be judging. It's hospital admissions. It's how is the general functionality of society coping with so many people falling ill. I think that in the UK, things have been so polarized where it's just like, if it's not causing death of the healthy population, I'm going to get on to this whole message where there seems to be a lot of like, oh, vulnerable people, it doesn't matter if they die. But the UK is so focused on like, people aren't dying as much, or more people die as flu. And I just can't believe that, we're in 2022 now, we're coming up to exactly 2 years of this pandemic, and we still have the UK thinking of it as whether people die or not about whether we have enough healthy people to keep the function of our society. That means offices running, postal services, haulage. I mean, the shortages that have happened in the UK for drivers. I mean, and then that's not even getting onto normal things like health system, which is always struggling in the winter and struggles with the flu anyway. And then we want to just let Omicron, let rip. If you heard my pronunciation of Omicron, it's because I'm half Greek. So I'm really happy. One nice thing of the pandemic is everybody's using Greek letters. So I just think that this constant attempt to minimize the situation, which seems like quite a British psychological response, or I don't know whether it's just because I see it in the press or on Twitter or from our politicians. Even Labour constantly are like, when are we getting back to normal? And of course, getting back to normal, it requires a tiny bit of sacrifice. And I don't mean sacrifices in like, we always have to wear masks, we have to do whatever. But we should expect that entering autumn, into winter, just as, health systems always struggle throughout history in that period, that now while we have a new pandemic, a new virus that is still producing new variants, that we should expect this to happen, and we should be like psychologically prepared to deal with that. Like, I don't get it. It creates a lot of problems. I also believe that in the UK, there's this idea that it's always like lockdown, I'm just going to bring up some of the things that I've seen in some of the notes that I was making. So I feel like the UK is constantly focused on wriggling out of COVID and its responsibilities to itself or society. Now, when I say UK, I'm not talking about the population. I'm talking about the government, what I see the media doing, and, even just the general setup and the discourse, okay? And I think that this has put the UK health system under the most pressure. People say that, procedures are being cancelled like in no other country, that, chronic patients are suffering, and that the vulnerable have little to no life, while you just let the general population take no restrictions. It means that vulnerable people are just sacrificed. It's like, if you want to go outside and die, fine, because we're not going to do anything about it, so you have to stay at home. And I think that isn't the indication of the kindest society. And again, I don't mean the population. It's the responsibility of our government to set the tone of how we're going to collectively share responsibility for this and deal with this, because it's not going away. That's the other thing. We're going to have to keep having boosters because variants will still come. Like, this will happen next year, possibly. Probably. So I also find it a little bit strange that there's no consensus in the public. Like, I'm here in Spain, people love to go out. Everybody always likes to be outside. But, people are aware that we never want to give up our freedom again, like the original lockdown. I think that in the UK, I constantly see these headlines like, lockdown's coming, or, and I know that people had terrible times in the second lockdown, I think it was last year, or even the third. I'm not sure how many lockdowns. Now, for us here, lockdown is a distant memory. We only refer in Spain to lockdown as the first one, the only one that we've had, which was March to May 2020. We have never had another lockdown. That's not something that is in our language. It's sort of like there's an idea here that we expect that restrictions will be put on and peeled off to enable the most smooth life that we can have, the smoothest life, that we can have. And I just feel that all of this idea that any restriction is lockdown in the UK, I think it's just, and it's such a pity because the government has consistently dragged its feet, which has made it late to address any of these issues. It hasn't been proactive in anything, which has meant that the UK economy has suffered more, that people's mental health has suffered more, that people have had to spend more time under a lockdown when other people had to spend 2 months and have never, ever returned to it. The other thing is that I talk about the UK, and that's really England-centric of me because England is the outlier. The other UK nations are putting restrictions, tiny restrictions, limits. Like we have here, a 10-person meeting throughout Christmas and New Year. This is being lifted in 1 week. We had 1 month of 10 people meeting. We have 99 deaths a day. The health system is functioning fine. And I just don't know why that's still so dramatic. It's so contentious back home between, you've got the Spectator and the Daily Express screaming about how this is, anti-libertarian. And of course, so many things can be called anti-libertarian, but also I kind of just want hospitals to work just in case, a family member gets a heart attack. I mean, I don't think that's called impeding freedoms. I mean, freedoms are mutually sustained. This is the basic political principle. I just think that that's something that's very difficult. It's something that doctors have been talking about on Twitter as well. I find that doctors are really good people to just read about because they tell you about how people are dealing with it on the front line. I think that what the Conservative Party have done is they say we're going to ride out Omicron, which essentially means pushing the NHS to its limit. And it's asking a huge sacrifice, a real sacrifice, not the ones that we're always talking about, but a real sacrifice of frontline workers and NHS staff, and especially nurses who are underpaid anyway. I feel for them. Like, why are they carrying the whole responsibility of this pandemic on them? They're at breaking point. We've had mass resignations last year. We have a staffing shortage in the NHS anyway, and I just don't think it's fair. For example, in this Omicron wave, the hospital admissions have been higher than last January in that terrible lockdown period that you had. So it's not that it's death or it's not that it's death and stuff. It's what's happening in hospitals. This is the concern. The pandemic isn't just about killing people. It's about everything else as well. Now, if the government had been bold enough to put something like a circuit break, like here, we've just had 10-person limit for 1 month. It's meant that we can live pretty fine and everything's been going on. They do actually tend to put curfews here as well. They try to limit movement between 1 a.m. and 6, but it's not enforceable. It just means that in the end, people feel inclined to want to wrap up their activities at 12:30 and get home, or at least not be going out to the clubs and stuff. Actually, yes, clubs have closed for 1 month though, so who knows? And that's just these are the things that are sort of having to happen. I do think that there are many things that could have been prevented. I do feel like we could have prevented, the economic damage to business that's happened through November and December just because of mass sickness. Like, that didn't need to happen. That hasn't happened in other places. It's been really bad in the UK. And also, I don't understand, because this is a problem that exists. It keeps happening. Where is the long-term vision? Why are we just constantly trying to wrap it up, like mentally push it away and be like, time to live with COVID, trying to make it endemic? Do you know what? Endemic doesn't just mean widespread. It doesn't have to be that way. Tuberculosis used to be endemic. Polio used to be endemic. We don't want those things. Like, why are we being like, well, might as well let it be endemic? To me, that sounds like a public health failure. We spent the last 20th century trying to get rid of all of the 19th century endemic things that we used to have. And now in the 21st century, we're like, screw all of that. Let's just sacrifice a whole load of the population. That's the other thing. I have seen, disabled people writing on Twitter saying, how does it make me feel to be like, oh, luckily only vulnerable people are dying, or luckily doesn't harm the healthy population. And it's just like, are they not human too? Are they not members of our society? Are they not our family members, our loved ones? And also vulnerable can mean as small as asthma. So, I think it's a bit, I don't know. I think a country as amazing as Britain, that we think that, we're such pioneers with so many things, inventors of things. How could we not think big on this one? Like, why have we just constantly underestimated it? Why do we say, oh, people wouldn't do that, or there's no political will? I find it sad. I find it like, instead of being brave, we've just said, oh, no, we wouldn't be able to do that. It's just so lacking in imagination and so lacking of meet the moment. I've been told my whole life about Britain's Blitz spirit, and the first real widespread catastrophe that I've seen, politicians have tried to lie about it, minimize it, and patronize the public whilst calling himself, because it's him mainly, a continuation of Churchill. I mean, I haven't seen any difficult truths meted out to the public, and I just don't know why. The way that they talked about boosters over Christmas so that they wouldn't, because Boris Johnson and the scientists wanted to put measures in. Let that be known. They didn't, the reason he can't is because he doesn't have political control of his own party, and the cabinet now runs him. So we will have Boris Johnson as Prime Minister until the Conservatives don't want him anymore. Let that be completely known. But yeah, in December, when instead of putting in public health things and talking to the public about why and the whole totality of a pandemic that's not just about death, he decided to emphasize that everybody was going to be able to get offered the booster by the end of December and the beginning of January, or by the end of December or something, and touting it's like, yes, everybody's been offered. Okay, so all they did is send a mass text to everybody, and that meant that they had fulfilled their public health policy. I mean, can you see how dangerous that is, where we care more about optics and how we sound like we're doing well in a pandemic rather than doing well? Like, it's just terrible. I think it's just terrible. So people were offered, but they can't get boosted until January or February, for example, because there's, too much demand or whatever. Now, I also find, last summer, that whole Freedom Day, I mean, what's the point? What's the point of why patronize people so much? I really don't understand why we have to do this. Why were we not encouraged to meet the moment? I think that as citizens, we're more than happy to do that and to be invited to the conversation as well. Anyway, I think that is pretty much everything I've got to say today. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your opinion. Let me know if you think I've got anything wrong. Let me know if you think I've got anything right. Please subscribe. I'd love to come back and make some more. And give me a like as well. Why not? Have a great day.